Good morning from Cincinnati outlets. Welcome to another episode of Shameless Plugs. As always, I am J.A. George, joined by my counterpart,
Samantha the Writer.
Yes. This is the final episode of our three-part series on building great characters. So,
Woohoo!
if you
How
listen
was your
to...
drive this morning?
My drive this morning was fine.
That's good.
Yeah.
Just curious.
There was no snow.
Not like last weekend?
Not like last weekend. Yes. Not like last weekend.
That's good.
Yes. Tying it back to that Cincinnati weather. So,
it's the thing that we do.
yes, it is the thing that we do. But
Weather is important.
weather is important.
It's important for your storytelling.
It is important for your
I
storytelling.
know. That's why I like to start with the weather.
Okay. I get it.
Just think about what is falling from the sky or not falling from the sky.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
So, characters. Three-part series dedicated to taking characters from good to great.
Woohoo!
So, hopefully you've listened to our last two episodes. If not, you should probably go do that right now before you listen to this one.
And only listen to those and then come back.
Yeah, listen to those two episodes and then come back.
It's important.
Yes. Yes. In all seriousness, I think you will have more context with where we're going today if you have listened to the past two.
Yeah, because we may make references to the past episode, like the characters that we both pantsed in the last episode,
Yeah.
or our favorite characters. Your
Yes.
favorite character is?
Peter Parker. Not Spider-Man, Peter Parker.
Very, very important distinction.
Yes, it is.
Sherlock Holmes on my side.
Yes.
He's just great.
Yes, he is great. He's
Just
a great character.
He is, yeah. He's great in the novels. If you haven't read them, read them.
Mm-hmm.
He's great on the TV show. If you haven't watched it, watch it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's all I got.
He's great at consuming opium, too. But, anyway.
Woo!
So.
Opium dens. Opium. Sorry.
Still topical. Anyway,
For whatever reason you said topical and I thought of Benadryl. Wow.
Okay, so.
Moving on.
Where we left our last episode, we were talking about agency. The characters need to be active, not passive. They need to be actively working to better their situation. They need to not just sit and wait for things to get better for them, not just sit and wait for situations to fix themselves. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is not going to sit there while Dr. Octopus robs a bank.
Nope.
Best Spider-Man villain. Sherlock Holmes is not going to sit there when there's a murder on Baker Street.
Nope.
They're going to go into action.
Yep.
So where does the action come from? Why do people act?
What is this mysticism you speak of?
Sorcery! They act for two reasons.
Yes, they do.
Because they either really want something, desires, motivations, or they really don't want something, fears. Those are the two reasons people do things.
And it's the reason that people, like actual human people, do things. So obviously it's the same thing with your characters. Your characters are people, in most cases.
Yes.
And so therefore they should act like people.
Yes, there is a reason why an outcome is desirable or they are incredibly averse to an outcome.
Right.
This goes back to something we talked about in a previous episode. Look, we're already making references to the last episode.
Oh, man.
But it comes from history. It comes from, their past. It comes from their desires in life. It is all about building that big old character knot that we talked about. But, in our last episode, we talked about my fictional, just made up on the podcast, three-piece suit, unruly hair guy.
Yeah.
That's his name now. Three-piece suit.
Three-piece suit, unruly hair guy.
Yeah, so my three-piece suit, unruly hair guy, he wants to have an incredibly neat apartment because he doesn't want to be like his mother. Again, we talked about that in the last episode, so I'm sorry if the reference is just not...
I mean, that's pretty much it. You pretty much caught everybody up to speed.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So that is his motivation, is he does not want to be like his mother. So for him, his fear might be, because his mother was a hoarder, since we established that in the last episode.
Yep, we also established that.
His mother was a hoarder. His fear might be that all of a sudden he starts collecting junk in his house, because again, he wants to be nothing like his mother. You manifest their motivations and fears in the actions that they take. You manifest it in the way that they live their life, what they surround themselves with, what they avoid. You touched on a good one of these in the last episode with the person who is afraid of the water.
Oh, yeah, my boat guy.
Yeah, your boat guy.
Yeah, so, if you have a character who is afraid of getting on a boat, in the last episode I said by the end of it, he either needs to be the captain of the boat because he, really wants to get over that fear. He wants to have a boat someday, so he goes and he takes swim lessons. He goes in the ocean. He does, he makes all these choices to get better at that. Or he needs to move 500 miles away from the closest body of water because he is so afraid of drowning because when he was a child, this is about to get really sad. He watched, his puppy run into the water and then it didn't come out.
Yeah, it is sad.
I'm sorry.
I'm not an animal guy, but so it didn't really affect me
Sorry,
that much.
puppy lovers. I love puppies and animals. I just pantsed that. If I were actually writing it, I'd probably go back and change it because I can't kill puppies.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry. That's...
But
anyway, so if that's what he's afraid of...
But you just told two different stories with that character. He was motivated to overcome his fears, and that was his thrust for the novel, taking the swim lessons and everything else, because his motivation was to overcome those fears, so he took action to overcome them, or he gave in to them and moved very far away.
Right.
You could tell either one of those stories.
Yeah.
Those are both entirely valid stories to tell, but... Your character's I think the more positive story is the one where he overcomes.
That would be the more positive story.
But I am not one of those people who's going to tell you that you always have to overcome the horrible things in your life. That doesn't have to be your story. If your story is the person who is so crippled by their fear of drowning that they move 500 miles, that's a perfectly valid story.
Right.
But it comes from someplace. It comes from the puppy that got killed.
So sad. I'm so sorry.
R.I.P. Scruffy.
I'm so sorry. His name was Biscuit. I need to stop.
Well, bye, Biscuit. I'm not an animal guy. Sorry. I don't spend my weekends euthanizing cats, but I'm not an animal guy. So
wow.
I'm...
This podcast just took a really dark turn.
Yeah. Well, I said I don't do that.
Yeah, this is true.
I
but
did
I mean,
say I don't do that.
Yep.
Anyway,
moving on.
Motivation.
So, motivation, but it is important because any little thing, and it doesn't have to be giant things either. Maybe your character is motivated by the fact that they really like a drink at a restaurant, so they go there, and that's how they meet, the con artist. There are little things that can come into play here as well. It doesn't always have to be a big story-changing factor. No, little things can also be motivation.
It could be little. They can be little. However, I am going to do a 180 and talk about a really big one from my character, Spider-Man.
Yeah, do it.
The thing that makes Spider-Man Spider-Man is his motto. With great power must also come great responsibility. I'm going to use the accurate quote from the comics as opposed to the bastardized version. But
hey, comics came first.
Yes, that's right. But that is the central tenet of the character. It is what makes me love that character. It is not everything has to be based on a tragedy. Samantha is absolutely right. Not everything has to be major, but it can be an absolutely essential part of your character. If Peter Parker had not taken the actions or taken the inaction. For those of you who don't know the origin, I'll do a very quick recap. Peter Parker got bitten by the radioactive spider. He got his powers. He used them for selfish personal gain. Everybody knows the spider biting part. Everybody knows the radioactive spider part. Where I think the first movie franchise, the one with Tobey Maguire, the reason why I love that one so much is because it understood the character and it made that motivation a central focus. The series that have come since have not been nearly as successful or interesting to me because they did not make that the central focus. They did not make the what came next, which I'm about to talk about, they did not make that important enough to the character and important enough to the story. They didn't reinforce the message that motivates everything Peter Parker does. They did not include the message that with great power must also come great responsibility. And the reason why Peter Parker learned that is because when he started using his powers for selfish gains, he did not stop somebody who was a robber. because he figured it wasn't his problem. Let the police handle that. Well, what happened next is that person broke into his house or did a carjacking in the movie and killed his uncle. His uncle, who was his father figure. So if Peter Parker had just taken action and not acted selfishly, his uncle would have still been alive. The most important one of the two most important people in his world would have still been alive. But he didn't take that action, and he learned from that lesson. That's why that message is so important to the character. Everything that he does is based on the idea that with great power must also come great responsibility. He constantly gives up his chance for happiness. He constantly damages his relationships with his friends because he has to use his powers to help other people. That is what's really cool about that character. He will suffer every personal indignity, every loss of face, every loss of a friend, because that message is just so central and so essential to his character. You got that with other characters like Batman, with the murder of his parents that turned him into a twisted nighttime freak. I love Batman, but I'm sorry, the man's crazy. So, but that's a central part of the character too.
Right, yeah.
But that motivation drives both of those characters, and it makes them do things that anybody else would think is absolutely crazy. You don't have to have something that big for your character, but you do have to have something that drives them to take the actions they take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and it's, is it your character experiences a 180 in their beliefs? That can be a motivator. If they're, in the middle of a situation and they're really staunch, I feel like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, and then something happens and they have to make that change. Is that their motivation? There's, you can work it into your novel in ways where you don't have to stand up and say, my character is motivated by pirates.
Yes.
You don't have to have your character stand up and yell their motivation from their roof.
In fact, you shouldn't.
Yes, you probably shouldn't do that.
That would be bad writing, most likely.
Most likely. But, it'd be kind of cool if someone did climb up on a roof and yell, I'm motivated by pirates. I'm not going to lie. I'd be like,
okay, that's fair.
All right, that's kind of cool. But, the decisions that they make are going to be informed by their motivation.
Yes.
The things that they desire are going to influence their actions.
And you should use those to mess with us as readers, to make us care.
Absolutely.
I care, when I get invested in your character, I care about, the guy who's now got to become captain of the boat or move 500 miles. I care, once you get me invested in him as a character, I'm invested in his outcome, based on his motivations, based on his fears. I want him to, win the regatta at the end of the novel.
So important!
Exactly. I want him to save the marina by winning the regatta against the greedy developer.
Absolutely. Or vice versa, you want him to feel safe and secure in his new home.
Exactly.
Whatever way you spin it, that you have the control to make your reader want things for your character.
Yes, and you have the control to mess with your character to raise the stakes.
It's so much fun.
It is. If all of a sudden, your drowning dude...
My drowning dude.
Yeah. Biscuit's daddy.
Poor Biscuit.
If Biscuit's daddy, we know that his fear is of drowning, and then you have his son fall into a pool or fall into a raging river... You've put him in a situation where he has to deal with that fear.
And he has to make a decision.
Yeah.
Is he gonna jump in and get his son, or is he gonna stand by and yell for help?
Yeah.
Those are two very different people, and they're two very different decisions. And as a writer, in my opinion, it's your responsibility to put your reader there.
It is, as writers... We do horrible things to people we love.
Oh my gosh, it's really unfortunate.
Horrible things. And unfortunately, that's kind of our job.
Yeah.
We have to mess with our characters because the character where there's no stakes, and stakes are based on motivations and fears.
And they're yummy.
Yeah. They are yummy. Love garlic butter. Anyway.
I like a good steak.
Yeah, I do too. But
if you think about steaks in the terms of food, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Unless you're a vegetarian and then it's a mushroom steak.
Yeah. There you go. But
anyway, sorry.
Steaks. I don't even remember what I was saying before
I'm sorry.
this tangent. But our job is basically to mess with our characters. Because that's what makes the story interesting.
Absolutely.
If there isn't the possibility of losing something, if there isn't the possibility of winning something that's really important to that character, then we aren't going to care as a reader. Reader doesn't get invested.
No. Mm-mm.
Manipulate those motivations, manipulate those fears. Put them front and center for your characters.
And that also puts them front and center for your reader. So if your character is living a realistic life, if you're, if the reason that my boat guy is anywhere near the water to begin with is because he went on a Boy Scout trip with his son as a supervisor, and they're at a campground, then that is a realistic reason for him to be close to a stream. Not just... And I decided to take my family to the beach because that character would never make that decision. Yeah. Never make that decision.
Never. Not a chance.
Nope. Mm-mm.
That kind of speaks to something. It kind of gets at something that we wanted to talk about in this episode. Characters have to have strengths and flaws.
Yes, they do.
They absolutely have to have things that they are good at and things that they are bad at.
Well, and I think to tie it back to my favorite character, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I think he's a really good example of that, because what's he really good at? He's got a brilliant mind.
Yes.
He notices things, he can put things together really fast, he can, he can do all this in his head without really even having to write any of it down. But because he's so analytical, what is he really bad at? Dealing with people. No people skills. The only reason that he has friends is because they feel like they need to take care of him. Otherwise, he's kind of just a jerk.
Yeah.
So he's really good at this one thing, and that's what makes people like him and find him interesting, but at the same time, you abhor his relationships with people because he's so terrible to them.
Yes. I don't want to read about the character who is average at everything, or the character who's great at everything. I don't want to read that, because that character, I can't relate to them at all.
No, absolutely not.
There are things that I'm good at and things that I suck at.
Yeah, same.
There's a reason why, to your point, there's a reason why we read stories about a master detective.
Yeah.
There are reasons why we read stories about the genetic experts in Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason why we want to read James Bond or watch his movies. Because these people are amazing at something.
Yeah, they are. They are absolutely amazing at something. And your character should be amazing at something.
But James Bond is also a complete womanizer.
Oh,
and in some characterizations, he's kind of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
You know? There are things that they're terrible at, too. That's what makes them believable. That's what makes it so a reader can relate to them. That's what makes us get invested and want to find out what that person is going to do next. Are we going to stop Dr. No?
I don't know. Are we?
Is James Bond going to get with Xenia Onatopp? That's a real character. I didn't make that up.
I don't know. Is he?
He doesn't get with her, but that's a real character.
Man. Do you see what we just did there?
Yes.
I was so excited.
Yes.
That's what you want I don't know. As a reader, when I'm yelling at characters in my head, that's when I am the most invested in a story. I love just being like, why would you do that?
But this is another chance to mess with your character and make the story more interesting. When I know that all of a sudden... trying to think of a good analogy here, that all of a sudden when all of a sudden, Spider-Man is a brilliant inventor. He made his web shooters and everything like that. He is not a bomb technician, though. No. When all of a sudden he's got a bomb to disable, I know that that's not a strength of his, so I want to see how he's going to figure out how to overcome that. That's not a great example because it's not like he has a particular flaw with disposing of bombs, but I have a chance to put a character in a difficult situation and deal with something that they are not good at. That is going to get my reader invested because you've just raised the stakes on them. That makes a character more interesting. That makes a situation more interesting. It makes the situation more interesting because you based it on the character.
But I think your example does provide something that is really important, and it goes back a little bit to the previous episode where we talked about consistency. So
Yes.
Spider-Man is really good at this part of technology,
Yes.
and not so good at this part of technology. But it's still technology.
Yes.
It's still within his wheelhouse.
Yes.
So if you have a character who, you know, is really good at building furniture, but then their flaw is that they've never used a hammer, that makes no sense.
None whatsoever. Yeah.
It makes no sense. Really, if you have a character who's really good at building furniture, but, you know, has a bad arm because they were in an accident as a child, that's an interesting flaw.
Yes.
What does that prevent them from doing in the context of furniture?
Yeah, and how do they deal with that?
Exactly.
Do they buy specialized equipment so now their prices are higher and they run the risk of losing their shop? It's those kind of things.
You know, so your flaws and your strengths have to be just as consistent as anything else in your story. Because if the two things are juxtaposed so much that it pulls your reader out of what you're trying to do, you're unsuccessful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Agreed.
that's the, you know, we need readers, people who are going to read, and if we pull our readers away from what they're reading, we're not doing our jobs.
Agreed. Agreed. So this all speaks, everything that we have talked about in these 2 episodes, it's a big old character knot, but everything that we have talked about ties back to something that is so freaking important. Characters must have depth and history.
Yep.
They come from somewhere. We
they
don't
do.
need to know every single
Nope.
fact, but every character has a history. Please don't tell us all of it,
No.
but you have to know it. You don't need to know every moment, every day they went to 5th grade, but you need to know the major things in their life, even if you never tell us. You need to know those major relationships. And that's another thing that I want to bring up while we're on this topic. Characters have relationships.
Yes, they do. They have to.
The way that I interact with Samantha is different than the way I interact with my wife or my daughter. Samantha does not know all of the people that I know.
No.
There are relationships that are going to affect your character that may never show up on the page, or they may only be hinted at, or they may only show up for one scene. But those relationships still affect your character.
And they absolutely matter. And if you have, you know, you can have, your character can have run-ins with people as he walks down the street. And those run-ins, as small as they may be, maybe they look at him a different way, or say nice shoes, or they bump into one another. Even those little interactions between your character and this person who's never going to come back is a relationship. It influences them. It has some kind of an impact on their psyche or the direction they're going, or it puts them in a bad mood, which means that the conversation they need to have with the lawyer doesn't go as well as it's supposed to. Like, all of these little things influence your character, and relationships are part of that.
Relationships are a major part of that, and relationships also speak to history. We've talked about my 3-piece suit unruly hair guy.
Yep. He's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's all right. I mean, he's all
For
right.
a podcast creation.
Yeah,
He's a cool dude.
For a podcast creation with no name other than 3-piece suit unruly hair dude. Anyway.
Original.
He had a relationship with his mom that affected the way he wears his hair, that affects the way that he cleans his apartment. It might affect what kind of shoes he wears. These things influence your character. You know, do you have certain phrases that you use in your life that you picked up from your mom or your dad? Or from your best friend? Everybody has those little ticks, those little twerks that come from somewhere. All of this speaks to the fact that our interactions with other people, our interactions with the world around us, change who we are.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Can I tangent for a second?
Of course you
can. We haven't talked about this, and I'm not really sure where it belongs, so I'm just going to do it right now.
Okay.
You mentioned voice, things, phrases that you pick up. Voice is important!
Voice is important. I thought this is where you were going to go with this, by the way. I kind of guessed this one.
It's the way that your character talks, the things that they say, the words that they choose.
The things that they don't say
The things
also.
that they don't say are very important to the building of your character and where they come from and their history. If, you know, J.A. and I both play with this idea of characters who don't use contractions. We talk about this a lot because I have a character who the culture of his people, they do not use contractions. It's not part of their language. So when he talks, things are phrased differently, and it's part of how my main character can distinguish between individuals because my main character is blind, so he has his ears. So it plays in a couple of different ways. It's important to this character, but it's important to my main character because that's how he knows who he's talking to. And I've taken it so far that they don't even do possessive contractions, so that's even more of a different type of speaking. So it's so important to think about those things as well. You know, a character who cusses all the time is going to have a really different relationship with a child.
Yes. And I'm going to go out, not a tangent, but this is what we've been talking about this whole two-part series. Your character, your non-contraction using characters, very different from my character.
Very different, yeah, and this is what's so fascinating.
Yes, the reason why my character doesn't use contractions is because he grew up in the United States. He moved here when he was 8, but he was the child of refugees, and his refugees came from a foreign culture. They were speaking a foreign language. They had difficulties with contractions in English, and it's a trait that he picked up from them. Yes, he grew up mostly in the United States. He understood contractions. He could use them effectively. But it's a habit that he picked. It's two things. It's a habit he picked up from his parents, and because his parents were killed when he was very young, it's also kind of his subtle way of honoring and keeping his parents alive in a way. Those are two very, very, very different reasons for not using contractions.
Yeah, they are. And what's so fascinating about it is technically it's the same trait.
Yes.
It's the same technique. But the reason that it's important to the individual characters is completely different. And that is what your job is. Your job is to figure out why something is important to your character, what it means to them, and how it incorporates into their life.
It is, okay, I'm going to use your favorite character. We read stories, we watch stories about characters because they are interesting. Sherlock Holmes and Monk are both detectives.
Yes, they are.
They are both bad at dealing with people, but it is for very, very, very different reasons and in very different ways.
Yes.
It is very easy to fall into stock stereotype characters. It is very easy to do. The hard-headed loner, the tomboy, whatever it is, it's very easy to fall into those characters. History, quirks, the personality are what make those characters stand out and memorable. There is a reason why we remember Monk. It is not just because he has obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's because we enjoy watching his interactions with other characters. We enjoy watching him because of his motivation to solve the crime, and that's partially related to his OCD. He has to figure out how to get over some of his issues to solve the crime and stop the murderer from getting away with it. Those are the things that bring that character to life, and it's why we remember Monk as opposed to some detective, some nameless detective that we don't remember from a novel that we read one time. Monk is a living, breathing character. He has that consistency. He has a set appearance. He has to be fastidious in his appearance. All of these things go into Monk. All of them go into Sherlock Holmes.
Well, and it's why you go back to characters.
Exactly.
It's why you go back. It's why you read every Sherlock Holmes story. It's why you read every Spider-Man comic. It's these things, you come back for them because you relate to them, or you get excited about what's going to happen next, or you want to see the character overcome something. All of these things are the reasons you go back, and ultimately that's what you want. You want your readers to come back. You want them to read your story again, or read the next story with your characters.
Yeah.
You want...
There is a reason why. I'm about to make a very obscure comic book reference.
Cool.
Probably 1% of our listeners will get this, but...
Congratulations, 1%.
Yes. You're the good kind of 1%er. Anyway, there is a reason why I remember Peter Parker, and I could tell you practically everything about him. And I do not remember anything about the main character of an obscure comic series from the 90s called Youngblood. It was from Rob Liefeld, who is a controversial figure within the world of comics. But I'm not knocking Rob Liefeld because he's made some characters I love. Deadpool is he partially created Deadpool.
Really?
Yes, he was part of creating
Learning.
Deadpool. But anyway, Youngblood, it just centered. All I remember from that book is that the main dude was an archer. That's all I remember. He had a bow and arrow. It was a team of characters. He had a bow and arrow. He had red hair. I can't tell you anything else about that character. I can't tell you his real name. I can't tell you his superhero name. I can't tell you anything about that character. In fact, I'm not even sure that I'm getting the character right now. I might be jumbling him up with other characters from that generic era of the 90s. Spider-Man, however, stands out to me because he has a history, he has a strong motivation, he has a strong personality, he has a unique appearance. All of these things that go into building a character, they did with him.
Well, and I think to that point, if you see another detective who has a hat and wears a long coat, you don't think about that other detective. You immediately think, oh, that's Sherlock Holmes, and then you're slightly disappointed when you find out it's someone else.
Yeah.
So it's like you want that's the character you want. You want the character that people go, oh, that's so and so, and then get disappointed when they find out it's not.
But I want to point out something important there. Spider-Man, Peter Parker stands out to me. Sherlock Holmes stands out not because the red and blue underoos.
No.
Not because of the hat and the coat. It's not because they are a collection of quirks.
Yeah.
It's not because they are a collection of unique little things that have no meaning. It's because they're a fully integrated whole of a character, and it comes from a place of history. It comes from a place of motivation. It comes from a place of fear. It comes from those intrinsic internal qualities that express themselves outward.
Absolutely. Well, that was a passionate thing there that we just...
We're pretty fired up on these episodes.
Yeah, these ones, well, because they're exciting and they're so important. What do you have if you don't have a character in your novel? A bunch of descriptions of where you are?
Yeah.
I might as well just take pictures.
Exactly. If you don't get me invested in your character, if you don't make me want to root for them, if you don't want to make me cringe at your villain, if you don't want to make me ram my fist down that villain's throat.
Oh yeah, it's important.
You haven't done your job successfully, and it all comes from building, taking the time, investing in your characters. It is partially, I know that you hear this all the time, it is partially listening to them. But the only way that you can listen to them and they can tell you is if you've given them the motivation to do that.
Absolutely.
If you've given them the internal intrinsic qualities to speak to you. If they can't speak to you, you probably have some more work to do to get them to the point. And I've had characters like that. I tried to write a novel. I really love the concept of this novel, but I could not get invested in my main character, so it hasn't gone anywhere yet. I haven't given up on it.
Yeah.
I still want to figure out what makes that character interesting, but he is just, right now, he's so bland to me that as much as I love the concept, I can't write the story. That shows through to your reader.
It absolutely does. And I think to kind of harken back to our last episode, the other thing is, don't give up, outlets.
No.
Don't give up.
You got the touch!
Wow.
Yeah.
Musical interlude.
Yeah. You do have the talent to make this happen.
You can make it happen. You just don't... If you have a character and you're listening to this and you're like, man, like, I've got work to do, good.
Yes.
That's good. Like, do the work to make the character everything you want that character to be, and you can do it.
Yes, don't get dejected and think, God, they've made it sound like there's so much work to do. If you love your character, do it. Invest. Start small.
Right.
Start small.
The reason that you have drafts 4, 5, and 6 is to get this kind of stuff right.
Yes.
It's not going to be perfect in your first draft. The first draft of my current work was so bad. It had to-be's and was-es where I needed walked and slept. It had characters who were half-formed. It had, characters who were all over the place with what they wanted. But that's the point of the other drafts. Get your ideas down and then refine.
And please don't give up on these characters you love.
No, don't give up.
Don't think it's too much work. Go back to the basics. I mean, this may not work for you. This would work for me.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, find what works for you. But Personally, I would say, okay, what does my character want? And then start thinking about why they want it.
Yes.
The external goal only matters because of the internal need.
Yeah, what is your character's point? And, characters have to be like real people, and real people don't always know what their point is, but real people are always working towards what they think they want.
Yeah.
So what does your character think they want?
And that could be an interesting play on the character. What do they think they want? And then when they get it, they're still not satisfied, so what do they really want?
Or what do they think they want, and then what do they actually get?
Yes.
They're not always going to get where they're going, but what do they get instead? And is that better for them?
This is Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want.
No.
You try sometimes, you get what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
That can be a really interesting story where they don't get what they want. You don't have to fulfill their motivations.
No.
But you have to understand their motivations to get them to the place where they need to be.
So ultimately, fall in love with your characters. Build interesting people who you want to spend years with, because you will.
Yes.
And after you get yourself published out there, you're going to have to answer questions about them, and you're going to have to talk about them. So build someone that you want to spend time with, talk about, understand.
To know. Yes, understand.
That's
Perfect
what's
word.
important about this.
Absolutely.
That's what's important about this.
It's all connected. There is an idea in Buddhism. Everything is connected.
Absolutely.
It's very true of character building. Everything is connected. And it all starts from what they want and why.
Right. So, thank you, Outlets.
Yes, we hope this 2-part series was helpful. We hope you got something.
Three-part.
Yes, 3-part. I keep doing that. We hope this 3-part series was helpful. We hope that you will take this and build amazing characters. We hope that you already have fantastic characters, and we have helped them go from fantastic to amazing.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about your characters with us, please do. We're on Twitter at Plugs Podcast. We're on Instagram, Shameless Plugs Podcast. We have an email address, shamelessplugspodcast@gmail.com. And we both have websites, www.samanthethewriter.com and www.jgeorgewriting.com.
Correct.
Boom!
Yes. Please visit us. Please interact with us.
Yeah.
Reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram or whatever.
And if you thought that these episodes were a bunch of rubbish, then you can contact us at wedon'tcare@wedon'tcare.com.
Yeah. Or if you just want to talk about anything, maybe you think it was mostly good, but part of it was rubbish. You want to talk about the mostly good part, not the rubbish part.
No, not the rubbish part. Yeah, no.
You can talk to us about the rubbish part, but...
Maybe.
As long as you're nice.
Yeah, as long as you're nice. We are always open to conversation.
Yes.
But not hate.
Yes.
There's no hate.
No hate.
Just conversation. In our world, at least.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks, Outlets.
Yes, we hope this helped. Enjoy. Love ya. Bunches. See ya.
Bye.